Good morning there, Matthew, and thank you very much for joining us on our latest Business Spotlight session. Really looking forward to the next sort of 30 minutes. I obviously know Frettens solicitors well, being in Bournemouth and the Dorset area, so really intrigued to hear your story and how you got your firm to where it is now. So let's just sort of kick off then, Matthew. As I said, sort of from my point of view, I'm an executive coach working with people like yourself, etc., helping take businesses to the next level. So I'm really keen to understand how you've progressed your business and where you're going in the future, etc. So just to sort of start it off, let's just pass it through to you then, Matthew, and just give us a bit of an introduction of who is Matthew, who are Frettens solicitors, and just a bit of your background and your story, your history.
Well, thanks, Gary. I'll try and give you the abridged version, so so I'm Matthew Frettens. I'm the managing partner at Frettens Solicitors. We currently have about 105 staff based in Christchurch and Dorset on the coast, and we have a second sister office in Ringwood, just in Hampshire on the New Forest borders. My role is I've been at Frettens just over 20 years now, which I can't quite believe. But it is a family business. It was started by my father back in the late 70s. He was working for a much larger firm and decided or was persuaded to set up on his own. And the basis of his vision, I suppose, back in the late 70s, when law was a very different place than it is today. It was full of sort of I was going to say middle-aged grey men, but that would include me. But certainly sort of lots of pinstripe suits and dusty papers everywhere. And the concept of running a business was quite contrary to what a lot of lawyers at the time felt. But my father felt that we were running a business like any other. It should be run on good business lines, and the client should be placed front and centre of our business. So that was his sort of view back then. He thought, well, if we do a reasonable job and charge a reasonable price, we might be reasonably successful. He was very successful in a very short period of time. And he built up this high street business in Christchurch, and he had offices around. And he grew that very quickly through the 80s and into the 90s. He obviously had his challenges, but I was never going to be a lawyer, Gary. I was never going to follow in my father's footsteps. Apparently, I look a bit like him, and so everyone would ask as a kid, you're going to be a lawyer like your dad, etc. So that was the last thing I wanted to do. So I fought valiantly hard against following his footsteps, but inevitably I was sort of sucked into it. But I trained with a much larger firm in Southampton, and then on qualification, I then went to work for another firm, another much larger sort of commercial firm. Mm-hmm. And then in about 2002, my dad phoned me up and he said, look, if you're ever going to come and work for me, now is the time. There's lots of commercial work. We haven't got anyone to do it. I am a company commercial lawyer. And my remit essentially back in the early 2000s was to come to Frettens and try and build the commercial side of the business. So we were very much a high street firm, lots of conveyancing, lots of sort of divorce wills, that kind of stuff. Really good business, really profitable business. But I think my father could see, and certainly, when I looked at it, I could see that there was room for expanding what the business could do. And if you look at our business today, again, I'm not taking all the plaudits for this, I certainly haven't, but we were lucky enough to recruit some good people. But essentially, we've now got a very strong corporate offering. We've got a very strong commercial property team. We've got an employment team, an insolvency team. We do lots of commercial litigation, together with all the traditional stuff that we've done for many years. So we're what I like to call, in a small way, a kind of a full service law firm covering our area, and we're a much more balanced outfit than we were perhaps when I joined 20 years ago. But largely down to the wonderful people that we've managed to employ and who've stayed with us in that time.
Excellent. That's great. Thanks for that, Matthew. Very, very interesting. I guess the sort of thing that jumps out for me there is family business. That's quite a different dynamic. I coach a number of people where it's husband and wife, father and son, and they're very different sort of businesses to be involved with. How did you find that transition as you coming in as the owner, founder's son? How did that work with you? Was it a struggle or did it work perfectly?
I mean, this could be a whole podcast on its own.
Yeah.
The short answer is I worked with my dad for about 10 years. So he retired in 2012,
Mm-hmm.
at which point sort of we bought him out, he retired. And what was it like? And my wife, I should also mention that my wife was one of our employment partners who came and worked with us. So for a lot of that time, my wife was in the business and my dad. So it was truly a family business from that sense. I think it has great challenges. Equally, I think looking back, I enjoyed working with him for those 10 years. We were quite similar in lots of ways. But I think I challenged him in a way that perhaps others in the business didn't. And so we would always have a kind of arm wrestle over certain things, but in a positive way. But 9 times out of 10, we would agree on the way forward. I think the difference, perhaps being second generation in a family business, is that in lots of respects, I'm much more confident about our business than he was.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that he wasn't lacking confidence, but the value I see in our business is that we can go on and we can do some great things. And I think he was concerned that we'd sort of we'd come this far, and perhaps he felt that was enough for him at that particular time as he was coming up to retirement. Whereas we were sort of quite eager a few years later to push it on, which we've done. But perhaps that's completely natural.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. When I work with people, I always say, what does your business look like when it's finished? What's the end goal? So when you came into the business with your dad, so did you have a different end goal? Did you both have to compromise, or did your dad step back and say, right, Matthew, off you go, it's yours in the future? How did that all work?
How did that all work? Well, I think he enjoyed sort of the energy and enthusiasm of the younger members of the team, if you like, including me. So he would be very supportive if we wanted to go down a few rabbit holes. And as we all know, there isn't a rabbit in every single rabbit hole. So he was quite a pioneer in lots of ways, and he was it was always he gave us enough rope to kind of go out there and do stuff. I think his I think the financial crisis of sort of 08-09 rocked the ship slightly in terms of we were heavily exposed in terms of residential conveyancing, for example, and so we had to do a lot of business management at that time in terms of changing what we were doing, changing how we were doing it. We lost some people. It was a really tough time for a year or two, but we kind of came out of it stronger, better, with a surer idea of who we are and what we wanted to do. And then I suppose he had to retire. Well, he didn't have to retire, but he sort of chose to retire. So it wasn't quite the ending, I don't think, that he wanted in terms of that sort of period between 08 and 2012 when he finally hung up his boots. But I think looking back, he had, he built something very special, and he built it up to a level. It's interesting that when we took over and 2 other people became equity partners when he retired. So there were 3 of us to begin with back in 2012, and we had we'd look at each other in partners meetings, and our overriding sort of ambition is just not to muck things up. And we had a rather sort of more explicit saying that we'd say to each other, but essentially it was, for goodness sake, don't drop any major clangers, And that took us a few years to get into the flow of things, and we slowly built the business up. But we got to, in about 2017, 2018, we got to a point where we'd hit a bit of a ceiling in terms of turnover. So we got to about 3 million turnover. Yeah. And I promise you, every year I could have told you exactly who in the business was going to build what, and it was very predictable. It was I wouldn't say it was boring, but it was definitely predictable, and we definitely hit a turnover level that we were finding it really difficult to kind of get through, which I think is quite common in a lot of businesses as they as they mature. So we made a very conscious decision back then to grow the business. And I remember saying to the other partners, well, what do you want to do? We could carry on doing this. We had a good profit margin. We were in a comfortable place, but we were beginning to lose one or two people. And obviously we were finding it quite difficult to recruit, quite difficult to kind of attract people to the business to help grow it. And perhaps we didn't back then have the confidence. So one of the biggest changes that we've seen was back then when we said, let's go for it. Let's try and get to 4 million. So we thought, well, gave ourselves, I don't know, 4 or 5 years to get to, to add sort of 33% on. It wasn't exactly a huge ask, but we did it very quickly. And so once you change your mindset, once you set yourself some genuine goals, and it coincided actually with a new our marketing director, who's now our commercial director as well, Liz Barr, coming on board, where we're actually focusing a lot on digital marketing, changing the way that we did things, and a few things came together. So we decided we got to 4 million very quickly in about 2 years, I think, and we've been successful in retaining some people. And so we set ourselves another target of 6 million. We thought, well, okay, we've got to 4 million. Let's go to 6 million by 2025, I think was the original thing. Well, we just built 6.5 million last year. So we got there in 2023, this year rather, I should say. So again, in sort of 5 years, we've managed to double the turnover of the business, which is largely to do with changing the mindset slightly in terms of let's have a growth mindset. That was really important to actually everyone agree that we want to grow. But secondly, it was all about, it became very clear that what we were really doing was trying to create an environment where our staff were really super engaged in what they were doing. They all had career paths, they all had targets that they were set, they understood why we were doing things, they understood their part in it. And once they were sort of supercharged with enthusiasm and motivation, actually, the world's your lobster, isn't it, as they say?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, one of my questions was, what do you attribute growth to? And you've touched on them all there, really, because it is about mindset, setting goals, having the team all aligned behind the vision and the mission of the business. So it's great to see that works. And doubling profits is fantastic in just a short few years. So if we delve down a little bit into that, then Matthew, if you had to start from square one again, what would you do differently? Because I'm keen for people to learn. The bottom line is, if you want to earn more, you've got to learn more. So I'm interested for people to sort of learn from your experiences. So what would you do differently if somebody was in your position going back a few years?
Good question, Gary. There's sort of lots of practical things, I think. So a business like ours, I think that focus on the staff and the people, which I think you would argue that we always had. I don't think we were brave enough to kind of test it. So, for example, we use Best Companies, who do the Sunday Times lists and stuff, and we use the Best Companies anonymous employee engagement survey. We do it twice a year. And this is not a vanity product or something that we just want to put on our social media to prove that we're, really cool. We genuinely listen to sort of what comes back out of that, and we genuinely make changes. And we've only done that we've done it, I think, for 4 or 5 years, maybe. And also the third party reviewing our service. So if there's 2 parts to our people business, one is the people in it and how engaged and motivated they are. And secondly, what kind of service are our clients getting? So that, and as managing partner, that's almost all I need to worry about. Are the people happy? And is the service that they're providing good? And almost everything else will look after itself.
Yeah.
Which that be true, but you know what I mean? That
yeah.
theory of my way. So I think if we started again, or we went back even 12, 15 years, I think I would put those steps in much earlier and realise that what we've actually got is a group of individuals who are working in a business. And do they really understand what their goals are? Do they really understand what the business strategy is? Do we have a business strategy? Do we have well-defined goals? Do we have we may be ambitious, but what does that ambition look like? And them understanding their role in it. And that's also been reflected in how we treat career progression and career path. So one of the things we found when we were a bit smaller was that career path wasn't necessarily very well defined in our business.
Mm.
This affected motivation, this affected engagement, where people said, look, I really like working here, but I don't know, in 5 years' time, I want to be here, and it doesn't look like there's any space, or you're not growing, and I think if we'd been a bit braver a bit earlier, we would have probably achieved more in the shorter space of time.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Trust in yourself and belief, I guess. If you've got the right goals, it's just a process to keep going there. Yeah. Interesting you talk about team, because again, sort of, I guess the three core areas which often come up are finance, time, and team. And you've mentioned that. And what did you say? 105 staff you've got there. So when you're recruiting, what sort of qualities do you look for in potential employees?
I think we have a fairly well-defined culture here. So, and what I mean by that is, a lot of us know the types of people that won't fit very well here. I'm sorry, it's more difficult to define who does, I suppose. I think we're an eclectic bunch, but I think I think when I look at staff, I'm looking for that enthusiasm, that work ethic, that engagement, that slightly more rounded approach to it. In terms of skills, often the brightest and best lawyers are not necessarily the most user-friendly or the most team-minded solicitors. And whilst you need a blend of different people, and if you did personality profiles on all of our staff, we have different ones. But actually, interestingly, and we have done the exercise, a lot of our staff share similar characteristics, and those are based around wanting to make a difference, wanting to add value, being experts at what they do, and also and those things are very important, but also that idea of sort of fitting into a business where they can be recognized, where they can feel valued and stuff. And I think we're not very good with prima donnas. So I think the All Blacks have a saying, which I probably can't repeat on this podcast either, but we sort of have the same one. So we don't really need any prima donnas particularly.
Mm-hmm.
Although there are some star players in our team who are great at going out there and getting the work in and all that stuff. And you need people like that. But you probably don't want to base your firm around sort of half a dozen super, Ronaldos and Messis.
Yeah.
Probably, we're probably more balanced than that.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, all about teamwork. What you've talked about, obviously you're a full service law firm, etc., but fundamentally you're running a business as a managing partner. That's your number one objective, and you've talked about the things around that. So, when you look at running a business, what would you say are the common misconceptions about running a business?
The common misconception is that revolves around probably, I'm not sure everybody fully understands that all our businesses are run on cash. So the cash bit is really important. So we spend lots of time talking to our lawyers, whose responsibility is ultimately to get paid for the work they do. Look, we've got lead-in times, we've got lock-up days, we've got all these wonderful things the accountants call. But what they're really saying is, I've got to pay my wages every month. So if it takes 3 months for your client to pay you, it's causing we've got a major cash burn there in the middle. So the cash element of stuff is really important. When we employ people, when we open new offices, when we buy new IT systems, when we refurb the office, do whatever, that burns into that. So actually the profits that we are making, there is a significant portion being reinvested into our business. And those are the things we have every couple of months. We have a cross section of staff, and we run we run the strategy part of the strategy is about the financials and how we're doing and what we're looking forward at going forward. And that is really important, so that we share that information so they understand that element. So it's a little bit of financial financial reminders in terms of the staff saying, look, we can't let certain things slide. We've got to be really rigorous about our financial health. I think running a business as well, I think a lot of people look at it as particularly when you grow, and we've taken on 31 new people in the last 12 or 18 months, I think. Okay. So we've got a lot of new starters, and I spend most of my time getting those people in and trying to assist them into their induction and try and get them into the firm up and running as quickly as possible. And that does take a long time. And I think with a business like ours, I don't have any widgets to sell, so I can't spend my time worrying about the product.
Yeah.
What I can worry about is the people delivering that, if they're delivering it in the right way, and also the end result in terms of, well, what do the clients say about this? We use a third-party reviews platform that reviews all of our stuff anonymously, and again, that's been really helpful in keeping everybody focused on the goals.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, arguably the two most important departments in any business is finance and marketing. And you touched on earlier about you brought in a new marketing director. I mean, there's a lot of law firms in Dorset, as there is all over the place. You obviously changed what you did when the marketing director came in, which got you to have that achieve that doubling of revenue. How do you at Frettens separate yourself against your competitors? What's your sort of unique selling point?
So we used to start from the basis that all solicitors are pretty grey, which I think is probably true. And it's not just because we have pink in our logo that we're different, although that does, when we did that a few years ago, that raised some eyebrows. Genuinely, I think, I've worked in other law firms. We've got lots of people who've worked in other law firms, bigger firms, smaller firms, firms about the same size. I think we're not particularly hierarchical. I think we've devolved responsibility and decision making down into teams, but we really do. So I'm not a micromanager under any circumstances. I don't do that. But what we do is provide genuine responsibility, which then creates a very, for the right people, they can respond incredibly well to that if you give them enough space. I think that is reflected in our culture, where because it's a fairly flat hierarchy. I'm very, very available to all of the staff. I meet with all the lawyers. I have fee earner review meetings with them, which is kind of performance stuff every 3 months. I personally do all of the fee earners career progression meetings. So I sit down with anyone who wants to twice a year, talk about their career ambitions, where they're going, what they're doing. Those things are quite different to some other firms, where it's a bit more structured, a bit more corporate, a bit more hierarchical, I suppose. And that does set us apart. I think we work incredibly hard, and I think everyone buys into that. But I think they do so because a lot of them are given enough space to do things, for themselves, without constantly worrying about, well, if I do this, then I won't. We're all working towards the same goal, I hope.
Yeah. Great. Excellent. I'm just conscious we're running out of time now, Matthew. So we started off on the sort of personal side and a bit about you. So finish off with a couple of questions on that. How do you balance your personal life with the demands of running a business?
You'd have to ask my wife, really, Gary. I don't know. It's not a 24-hour job for me. There are times when you'll have to jump in and do stuff. We built a team here so that I'm one of my superpowers is delegation, so I'm good at delegating. Someone once said to me that if someone can do something about 80% as well as you can, you really should delegate to them.
Yeah.
And I bought into that. The older I've got, I thought, yeah, actually. So I still do some client work, so I still do some client-facing work, although that's hugely reduced from where it used to be. And so I juggle those things. I'm constantly looking forward. So my job really is it's not to look back at what we've done or achieved or how it's gone. It's really what's happening over the next few months. So I spend a lot of my time, that free time at home or whatever, or when you're looking through stuff in a quiet 5 minutes, I will be looking at sort of work coming in and what it's looking like in the next 3 months, where the bumps and troughs are, all that kind of stuff. So I suppose that occupies my thinking time, but I do try and separate it out. So on a personal level, I've got 2 kids who are sort of 12 and 14, and so my weekends are driving to netball and doing all that, and I can switch off.
Okay.
You never really switch off 100% probably, but I'm definitely better than I used to be.
Okay, excellent. And 2 final quick fire questions for people. What would be your favorite most recommended business book for people to read?
I'm going to give you 2, Gary.
Yeah.
Because one's a bit lawyery, but there's a guy called Simon McCrum who wrote a book called The Perfect Legal Business.
Okay.
Any lawyer, any partner should read that book, because I go back to that again and again. And
yeah, and that was Simon
McCrum, MCCRUM, I think.
McCrum. Okay, yeah.
And he's written a few other books, but The Perfect Legal Business is my go-to. And then a more sort of generic book is by, I think I'm going to get this right, is L. David Marquette's, his Turn the Ship Around.
Okay.
That's that. But that was all about delegating kind of leadership down into teams and departments. And he ran a nuclear submarine for the US.
Right. Okay.
It's a brilliant read.
Mm.
And also, you kind of, when you have a slight light bulb moment thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, get it. I understand that now. And that's sort of that command, sort of leadership model he sort of took apart and within the Navy, which obviously was quite a difficult task. So he sort of took that apart in his submarine, and they became the best performing submarine in the fleet. Okay. And it's a really good read, and I've definitely taken bits from that. I'd recommend that highly.
Excellent. And last one, which will give us a bit of an insight into you as well. What's on your bucket list?
Oh, what's on my bucket list? I don't know. What's on my bucket list? Well, I'd love, now the kids are getting older. I'm probably not allowed to say this, but I'm quite looking forward to my wife and I disappearing on a plane somewhere, or in New Zealand or Australia, or doing some proper traveling. Would be lovely. Outside of school holidays, that would be better. Yeah, lots of things. I'd quite like to follow the British Lions around Australia or something.
Okay, great.
Would be high on my list of things to do, I think.
Excellent. Yeah, I was out in South Africa when the Lions toured there, 2010, I think it was, around there. So no, that was brilliant. And actually, I understand about the kids. My youngest child, my daughter, has just finished her A-levels last year and is now doing a gap year traveling around. So my wife and I are sitting and thinking, what did we used to do before kids? It's quite strange. I'm no longer taxi dad taking everybody around. So world's very different now. So
yeah, and I'm not sure you're supposed to look forward to that, but
yeah,
beginning to anticipate that, I think. So
yeah.
That should be good. But yes, lots to do with our business as well. I think we've still got some fairly big ambitions here. So looking to seeing that play out.
Good. Double again in 5 years then, Matthew?
Well, our current strat, we're going to be 50 years old in 2028.
Okay.
We should probably get to 10 million turnover. And I realise turnover is, vanity and all that. But actually, as a goal, it's if we can keep all the other KPIs in place and behaving themselves, then actually that gives us a good focus. So that's our current plan. 5 years. So.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Matthew. It was very insightful, very enjoyable as well. So good to hear your story and the success that you're going on with. So, and again, appreciate you taking the time to join us and tell us your story.
Pleasure, Gary. Nice to join you this morning.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matthew.